At the family dinner, my son-in-law raised his glass. "You're a disgrace to this family and an embarrassment. Starting tomorrow, you'll live in a nursing home or on the streets." I left in tears, not a single dollar in my pocket. But then a mysterious man approached me and said, "Are you Peter? I have news about your aristocrat uncle's inheritance." At that moment, I fell to my knees because I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Peter, and at 67 years old, I thought I had seen everything life could throw at me. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The dining room felt smaller that night, suffocating almost, with its burgundy wallpaper and heavy oak furniture that my late wife Margaret had picked out 20 years ago. The same table where we'd shared countless Sunday dinners, where my daughter Sarah had done her homework as a child, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays. Now it felt like a courtroom, and I was the defendant. Sarah sat across from me, her lips pressed into that thin line I'd grown to recognize over the past few months. Next to her, Patrick lounged in his chair like he owned the place, which I was beginning to realize he seemed to think he did. The man had married my daughter 3 years ago, moved into our family home after Margaret passed, and slowly but surely made me feel like a stranger in my own house. "Dad, we need to talk," Sarah said, not meeting my eyes. She was picking at her meatloaf, the same recipe Margaret used to make, though Sarah never quite got it right. Too dry, not enough seasoning. But I never said anything. I'd learned to keep my mouth shut about a lot of things lately. "What about, sweetheart?" I asked, though something in my chest was already tightening. The way she'd been acting lately, the hushed phone conversations that stopped when I entered a room, the looks that passed between her and Patrick when they thought I wasn't paying attention. Patrick cleared his throat and leaned forward, his elbows on the table in a way that would have made Margaret cringe. "Peter, we've been thinking. This house is getting to be too much for you to manage." I blinked, confused. "Too much? I've been managing just fine. I keep the yard up, I cook my own meals." "Dad, you're almost 70, Sarah interrupted, finally looking at me. Her eyes were cold, nothing like the warm brown they used to be when she was little and would crawl into my lap to read bedtime stories. "You can't keep pretending you're still young." "I'm 67, not 90, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm in good health. The doctor said so just last month." Patrick snorted. "Yeah, well, doctors don't see you at home. They don't see you forgetting to turn off the stove or leaving the front door unlocked." My hands trembled slightly as I set down my fork. I've never left the stove on. "And the door was unlocked one time because I was expecting the mailman with a package." "One time that we know of," Patrick shot back. His voice had that edge it got when he'd been drinking, though I hadn't seen him with a beer tonight. Maybe he didn't need alcohol anymore to be cruel. Sarah reached across the table and patted my hand, but there was no warmth in it. It felt like a gesture she'd practiced. "We're worried about you, Dad. Living alone in this big house, it's not safe anymore." "I'm not alone. You two live here too." Even as I said it, I realized how pathetic it sounded. They lived here, but they weren't really here, not for me. They had their own wing of the house, their own routines. I might as well have been a ghost haunting the hallways. Patrick stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. He walked to the window and stood there with his back to us, his shoulders rigid. When he turned around, his face was set in hard lines. "Let me be clear about something, old man," he said, and my heart sank at the tone. "You're not our responsibility. You're a burden, a liability." "Patrick," Sarah gasped, but she didn't really sound shocked. More like she was upset he was saying it out loud. "No, Sarah, he needs to hear this." Patrick moved closer to the table, and I could smell the cologne he wore, something sharp and expensive that always made my nose itch. "You sit around this house all day, doing nothing productive. You watch your old Western movies, you shuffle around in those ratty slippers, and you expect us to take care of you." I felt heat rising in my cheeks. "I don't expect anything from you. I never asked you to move in here." "Oh, that's rich," Patrick laughed, but there was no humor in it. Where else were we supposed to go? Sarah couldn't afford her own place after college, and I was trying to get my business off the ground. "You think we wanted to live with some sad old widower?" The words hit me like physical blows. I looked at Sarah, waiting for her to defend me, to tell her husband he was being cruel. Instead, she looked down at her plate. "The truth is, Dad," she said quietly, We've been talking to some very nice assisted living facilities. There's one called Sunset Manor that has a great reputation. They have activities, people your age to socialize with. You want to put me in a home? My voice cracked, and I hated how weak I sounded. It's not putting you anywhere, Patrick snapped. It's helping you find a place where you belong. Because you sure as hell don't belong here anymore. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. This is my house. Margaret and I bought this house 32 years ago. We raised Sarah here. It's my home. Patrick's eyes gleamed with something nasty. Actually, Peter, we need to talk about that too. Talk. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper. See, the thing is, this house isn't really yours anymore. My blood went cold. What do you mean? Sarah finally looked up, and I saw something in her face that made my stomach drop. Guilt, maybe, but not the kind that would stop her from doing whatever they'd planned. Dad, last year when you were in the hospital with pneumonia, you were really out of it. You signed some papers. What papers? My voice was barely a whisper. Patrick unfolded the document with exaggerated care. Power of attorney papers and a deed transfer, for your own protection, of course. The room started spinning. I remembered being in the hospital, remembered being groggy from medication, remembered Sarah coming in with a stack of papers and saying something about insurance forms. I'd been so weak, so grateful that she was handling things. You can't. That's not legal. I was sick. I wasn't thinking clearly. Oh, but you were, Patrick said smoothly. We made sure of that. Had the doctor confirmed you were mentally competent when you signed. Everything's completely legal. I felt like I was drowning. Sarah, please, tell me this isn't happening. She wouldn't meet my eyes. We're not kicking you out, Dad. We're just encouraging you to make the right choice, for everyone. Patrick walked back to his chair and sat down, leaning back like he'd just won a poker game. Here's how this is going to work, Peter. Tomorrow morning, you're going to pack up your personal belongings. We'll drive you to Sunset Manor and get you settled in. The state will cover the costs since you're basically indigent now. Indigent. I have savings. I have my pension. Had, Patrick corrected, past tense. Turns out maintaining this house has been pretty expensive. Taxes, repairs, utilities, it all adds up. The betrayal hit me like a physical force. My own daughter, my little girl who used to braid dandelions into my hair and tell me I was the best daddy in the world, had stolen everything from me. And if I refuse? I managed to ask. Patrick's smile was cold as winter. Then you can figure out how to survive on the streets, because either way, you're not staying here. I stood up on shaky legs, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give out right there. Sarah, please, I'm your father. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw the little girl I used to know. But then Patrick put his hand on her shoulder, and her face hardened again. I'm sorry, Dad, but this is what's best. I walked to my bedroom in a daze, my legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. I sat on the edge of the bed Margaret and I had shared for so many years, and I wept. Not just for losing my home, but for losing my daughter, for realizing that the family I thought I had was nothing but an illusion. The next morning, I stood on the sidewalk with a single suitcase and $17 in my wallet. Patrick had dropped me at the corner, said Sunset Manor would pick me up, but I knew better. There was no Sunset Manor, no plan. They just wanted me gone. As I stood there in the morning sun, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. A man in a gray suit stepped out, looked directly at me, and said something that would change everything. Excuse me, are you Peter Holloway? I stared at the man in the gray suit, my suitcase handle cutting into my palm where I'd been gripping it too tight. He was maybe 50 years old, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Everything about him screamed professional, expensive. The kind of person who belonged in boardrooms and country clubs, not talking to homeless old men on street corners. Yes, I'm Peter Holloway, I said, my voice hoarse from crying. Who's asking? He smiled, and it wasn't the fake, practiced smile I'd gotten used to from Patrick. This one seemed genuine. My name is James Whitmore. I'm an attorney with Whitmore, Bradford & Associates. I've been trying to locate you for quite some time. An attorney? My stomach clenched. If this is about some debt or lawsuit, I should tell you right now that I don't have anything left to take. Mr. Whitmore's expression softened. Mr. Holloway, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not here to collect anything from you. Quite the opposite, actually. Is there somewhere we could talk privately? I looked around the suburban street where my daughter had dumped me like garbage. A few neighbors were peeking through their curtains, probably wondering about the commotion. Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down gave me a little wave, and I felt my cheeks burn with shame. She'd probably heard about what happened. "There's a diner about 6 blocks from here," I said. "The Bluebird Cafe. But I should warn you, I only have $17 to my name." "Please, allow me to buy you breakfast," Mr. Whitmore said gently. "And perhaps you'd like to put your suitcase in my car. I promise it'll be safe." The walk to the diner felt surreal. Here I was, supposedly destitute and homeless, being escorted by a lawyer who drove a car that probably cost more than I used to make in 2 years. Other people on the street stared at us, this odd pair, and I wondered what they saw when they looked at me. A charity case? A fraud? The Bluebird Cafe was nearly empty at 9:30 in the morning, just a few regulars nursing coffee and reading newspapers. Dolores, the waitress who'd been working there since the Carter administration, took one look at me and frowned. "Peter, honey, what happened to you? You look like you've been through hell." "Something like that," I mumbled, sliding into a booth across from Mr. Whitmore. "Just coffee for me, Dolores." "Nonsense," Mr. Whitmore said firmly. "Bring us both the full breakfast, please. Eggs, bacon, toast, the works." Dolores raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Coming right up." When she was gone, Mr. Whitmore opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. "Mr. Holloway, what I'm about to tell you might come as quite a shock. Are you familiar with the name Reginald Holloway?" I shook my head. "Should I be?" "He was your father's older brother. Your uncle." I felt confused. My father never mentioned having a brother. He said he was an only child. Mr. Whitmore nodded knowingly. "That's not uncommon. The Holloway brothers had what you might call a falling out in 1951. From what I've been able to piece together, it was over money and a woman. They went their separate ways and never spoke again." "Okay, but what does this have to do with me? If he existed, this uncle, he's probably been dead for years." "He died 6 months ago," Mr. Whitmore said quietly, "at the age of 93, and he spent the last 30 years of his life trying to find his brother's family." Dolores brought our coffee, and I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, grateful for something to hold on to. "I still don't understand why you're telling me this." Mr. Whitmore opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. It was old, black and white, showing 2 young men in military uniforms. One of them looked remarkably like my father had in his army photos. "This is your father, Thomas, and this is Reginald," he said, pointing to each man. Reginald went on to become quite successful in real estate development. He never married, never had children of his own. When he realized he was dying, he hired private investigators to track down any surviving family members. My head was spinning. "Are you saying I have a rich uncle I never knew about?" "Had," Mr. Whitmore corrected gently. "And yes, Reginald was quite wealthy. His estate is valued at approximately $12 million. I nearly choked on my coffee. 12 million? The bulk of his holdings include a estate in Virginia, several rental properties, and a substantial investment portfolio. According to his will, everything goes to his brother's surviving family members. But my father's been dead for 15 years. Which means," Mr. Whitmore said, pulling out another document, "everything goes to you." The words didn't compute. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for him to tell me this was some elaborate joke or scam. "That's impossible. Things like this don't happen to people like me." "I understand your skepticism," Mr. Whitmore said. "It's a lot to process, but I have all the documentation right here. Birth certificates, DNA evidence from your father's military records, the will itself. It's all legitimate." Dolores brought our breakfast, heaping plates of eggs and bacon and hash browns. The smell made my stomach growl, reminding me that I hadn't eaten since yesterday's disastrous dinner. But I couldn't focus on food. "Why now?" I asked. "Why did it take so long to find me?" Mr. Whitmore cut into his eggs thoughtfully. "Reginald hired several firms over the years, but your father changed his name when he enlisted in the Army. Thomas Holloway became Thomas Holloway. Just one letter different, but it was enough to throw off the search for decades. And you're sure this is legal? No one's going to come out of the woodwork claiming they deserve it more?" "I've been practicing estate law for 25 years, Mr. Holloway. This is as ironclad as they come." Reginald was very specific in his instructions. He wanted his brother's family to be taken care of. I took a shaky bite of toast, my mind racing. "What happens now?" "Well, there are some legal formalities to complete, probate proceedings to finalize, But in the meantime, there's something else. He reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a set of keys. The Virginia estate comes fully furnished. Reginald specified in his will that you should have immediate access to it, even before probate is complete. Consider it temporary housing until everything is official. I stared at the keys like they might bite me. I can't just move into some dead man's house. It's not some dead man's house, Mr. Whitmore said firmly. It's your house, or it will be, very soon. But what about? What about my daughter? What about Sarah? Shouldn't she be entitled to something? Mr. Whitmore's expression grew carefully neutral. The will is very specific. Everything goes to Thomas Holloway's surviving son. There's no mention of granddaughter or anyone else. Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. You know about what happened, don't you? About Sarah and Patrick kicking me out. He was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee. Mr. Holloway, as part of our investigation, we did some background research. We know about the house transfer, the power of attorney documents. We know about your current situation. They stole everything from me, I said, and the words tasted bitter. My own daughter helped her husband steal my home, my savings, everything my wife and I worked for. I'm very sorry that happened to you, Mr. Whitmore said quietly. But I want you to know that what they did doesn't affect your inheritance in any way. Uncle Reginald's estate is completely separate from anything that happened with your previous assets. I felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't entirely from grief. There was something else mixed in. Hope, maybe, or just shock. How long before this is all official? I asked. Probably 4 to 6 months for the full probate process. But like I said, you can move into the estate immediately, and there's also this. He slid another document across the table. Reginald set up a trust fund specifically for living expenses during the transition period. $5,000 a month, starting immediately. $5,000 a month. I'd been living on $1,200 a month from Social Security, and even that was barely enough. $5,000 felt like winning the lottery. I don't know what to say, I whispered. You don't have to say anything right now, Mr. Whitmore said kindly. This is overwhelming, I know. But Peter, I want you to understand something important. Your uncle spent his final years filled with regret about the family he'd lost. Finding you, making sure you were taken care of, it was his way of trying to make amends for all those lost years. I looked out the window of the diner, back toward the neighborhood where I'd lived for 32 years, where my daughter had thrown me away like I was nothing. Then I looked at the keys sitting on the table between us. What's the house like? I asked. Mr. Whitmore smiled. It's beautiful. 15 acres, built in 1896, completely renovated about 10 years ago. It has a library, a workshop, gardens. I think you'll find it very peaceful. Peaceful. When was the last time my life had been peaceful? Certainly not in the past few months. Watching my daughter turn into someone I didn't recognize, feeling Patrick's contempt every time he looked at me. There's just one thing I need to know, I said. Does Sarah know about any of this? About the inheritance? Mr. Whitmore's expression became very carefully blank. What makes you ask that? Something cold settled in my stomach. You said you'd been looking for me for quite some time. How long exactly? About 18 months. The timing hit me like a punch to the gut. 18 months ago was right around when Sarah's attitude toward me started changing. When she started those conversations about me being too old to live alone. When Patrick started making his cruel comments about me being a burden. Oh God, I breathed. They knew, didn't they? Mr. Whitmore's silence told me everything I needed to know. The careful way he folded his napkin, the way he avoided my eyes, the slight tightening around his mouth. My hands started trembling, and it wasn't from the diner's air conditioning. They knew, I said again, and this time it wasn't a question. Sarah and Patrick knew about the inheritance. He sighed deeply, looking older than he had just moments before. Mr. Holloway, I think we should discuss this somewhere more private. No, my voice came out sharper than I intended, loud enough that Dolores looked over from where she was wiping down tables. Tell me now. Tell me everything. Mr. Whitmore glanced around the nearly empty diner, then leaned forward and lowered his voice. Our investigation required us to contact family members to verify relationships and gather information. About 18 months ago, we reached out to your daughter. The bottom dropped out of my world. You contacted Sarah 18 months ago. We needed to confirm family connections, gather documentation. It's standard procedure in cases like this. What exactly did you tell her? We informed her that we were conducting an estate investigation regarding a potential inheritance for her father. We asked for cooperation in verifying family records. I felt sick. Actually, physically sick. The eggs I'd been eating turned to lead in my stomach. So she's known for a year and a half that I was inheriting millions of dollars. We didn't specify the amount at that time, but yes, she was aware that there was a substantial inheritance involved. The betrayal hit me in waves. It wasn't just that Sarah had kicked me out, stolen my house, taken my savings. She'd done it all while knowing that I was about to become a wealthy man, while knowing that I didn't need her charity or her cruelty. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Why would she do that if she knew? Mr. Whitmore was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. Mr. Holloway, I'm afraid there's more you need to know. More? I couldn't imagine what could be worse than what I'd already learned. He reached into his briefcase again and pulled out another folder, this one thicker than the first. As part of our investigation, we needed to verify that you were indeed Thomas Holloway's son. We also needed to understand your current circumstances to ensure proper transfer of assets. What does that mean? It means we hired a private investigator to conduct background research on your family situation. The cold feeling in my stomach spread through my entire body. You've been watching us. Investigating, yes, for several months. We needed to understand the family dynamics, ensure there were no complicating factors that might affect the inheritance. What did you find, Mr. Whitmore opened the folder and pulled out what looked like a typed report. Mr. Holloway, I'm going to be very direct with you because I believe you deserve to know the truth. Your daughter and her husband have been systematically stealing from you for over 2 years. I gripped the edge of the table. What do you mean, systematically? The house transfer was just the final step. It started small. Unauthorized withdrawals from your savings account, credit cards opened in your name, your pension checks being redirected to accounts they controlled. That's impossible, I would have noticed. They were very careful, small amounts at first, always with plausible explanations. A few hundred here for groceries they claimed to have bought for you, a few hundred there for household repairs they said you'd requested. By the time the amounts became significant, they had positioned themselves as your caretakers, the responsible children managing your affairs. I thought back over the past 2 years, trying to remember when things had started feeling different. When Sarah had started offering to help with my bills, insisting it would be easier if she just handled everything. When she'd convinced me to add her name to my bank account for emergencies. How much? I asked. Mr. Whitmore consulted the report. In total, approximately $87,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $87,000. My entire life savings, gone. Money that Margaret and I had scraped together over 40 years of marriage, putting away $20 or $30 at a time, skipping vacations, buying generic groceries, driving used cars until they fell apart. But why? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. If they knew about the inheritance, why steal from me at all? According to our investigation, they initially believed the inheritance might take years to materialize, if it ever did. They viewed your savings as money they would eventually inherit anyway, so they started helping themselves early. And when they realized the inheritance was real and substantial, Mr. Whitmore's expression grew even more serious. That's when they shifted strategies. They realized that if you inherited $12 million while still living independently, you might cut them out entirely. You might discover what they'd been doing. You might leave everything to charity out of anger. The pieces were falling into place, and each one felt like a knife in my chest. So they decided to have me declared incompetent. The plan, as far as we can determine, was to have you committed to a care facility, obtain legal guardianship, and control the inheritance through power of attorney. But something went wrong. Yes, they moved too quickly. The inheritance process accelerated faster than they anticipated, and they panicked. Rather than wait for a legal guardianship proceeding, they decided to simply force you out and hope you'd disappear quietly. I stared down at my hands, these old weathered hands that had worked so hard for so many years, and I felt something I'd never experienced before. Not just anger, but rage. Pure, white-hot rage. How long have you known all this? I asked. We've been piecing it together for months. But we couldn't act until we had verified your identity and confirmed the inheritance. We also needed solid evidence of their actions. Evidence? Bank records, forged documents, recorded phone conversations, enough to file criminal charges if you choose to do so. The thought of Sarah in handcuffs, of Patrick being led away by police officers, should have given me satisfaction. Instead, it just made me feel hollow. This was my daughter we were talking about, the little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest while I read her bedtime stories. "There's something else," Mr. Whitmore said quietly, "something I think you should see before you make any decisions about how to proceed." He pulled out a small digital recording device and set it on the table between us. "Our investigator recorded this conversation 3 weeks ago. Your daughter and Patrick discussing their plans." My finger hovered over the play button. Did I really want to hear this? Did I want to know exactly how much contempt my own child had for me? "Peter, you don't have to listen to this now," Mr. Whitmore said gently. "You can take it with you. Listen when you're ready." But I was already pressing play. Sarah's voice came through the tiny speaker, crystal clear. "I still think we should wait for the guardianship hearing. It would be cleaner, more legal." Patrick's voice was harder, impatient. "We don't have time for that. The lawyer could show up any day now. If Dad finds out about the money before we get him committed, we're screwed. But just kicking him out? Patrick, he's my father. He's a senile old man who's outlived his usefulness. Look, Sarah, we've already spent most of his savings. If he gets that inheritance and finds out what we've done, he'll have us arrested. Is that what you want? Of course not, but nothing. We stick to the plan. We make him so miserable he'll be grateful for any way out, even if it's the street. Once he's gone, we file a missing persons report, have him declared dead eventually, and inherit everything as his only surviving family." There was a long pause, then Sarah's voice again, smaller now. "What if something happens to him? What if he gets hurt, or, then that's his choice, isn't it? He's choosing to be stubborn instead of accepting our help. We're not responsible for what happens to crazy homeless people." I reached over and stopped the recording, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hit the button. The diner around us seemed to fade away, and all I could hear was the sound of my own heart breaking. "I'm sorry," Mr. Whitmore said quietly. "I know how difficult this must be." "She wanted me dead," I whispered. "My own daughter was planning for me to die on the streets so she could inherit money that was never hers to begin with. I'm afraid it appears that way, yes." I sat there in the silence of the nearly empty diner, surrounded by the debris of my shattered life. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my daughter, about the life I'd built, was a lie. Sarah hadn't just betrayed me. She'd planned my destruction with the cold calculation of a stranger. "Mr. Whitmore," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt, "I want to see this house, this inheritance. I want to see what my uncle left me. Of course, I can drive you there today if you'd like. And I want copies of everything, every document, every recording, every piece of evidence you've gathered." "Absolutely." I picked up the keys to the Virginia estate, these small pieces of metal that represented a future I'd never imagined possible. "There's just one more thing I need to know." "What's that?" "Does the will specify that I have to tell anyone about the inheritance? Do I have any legal obligation to inform Sarah or Patrick about what I've received?" Mr. Whitmore's lips curved in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Mr. Holloway, the will is very clear. The inheritance is yours to do with as you see fit. You have no obligation to inform anyone of anything." For the first time in months, I felt something that might have been peace settling over me. Not happiness, not yet, but a sense that maybe, just maybe, there was still some justice left in the world. "Then let's go see my new home," I said, standing up from the booth. "I have a feeling I'm going to like it very much." The drive to Virginia took 3 hours, and with every mile we traveled, I felt like I was moving further away from the nightmare my life had become, and closer to something I couldn't quite believe was real. Mr. Whitmore had given me copies of all the documents during the ride, and I spent most of the trip staring at bank statements that showed my daughter's betrayal in black and white. Withdrawal on March 15th, $800. Sarah's handwriting on the memo line, Dad's prescription medications. I remembered that day. I'd offered to drive myself to the pharmacy, but Sarah had insisted on handling it. The medications had cost $67. Where had the other $733 gone? Withdrawal on April 22nd, $1,200. Memo: emergency home repairs. I'd asked Sarah what needed to be repaired, and she'd said something vague about a plumbing issue she'd already handled. I'd never seen any repair work, never met any plumbers. Page after page of lies, documented with the care of an accountant and the cruelty of a con artist. Each entry felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship, another piece of evidence that the daughter I'd raised and loved had been systematically destroying me. "We're almost there," Mr. Whitmore said as we turned off the main highway onto a winding country road lined with oak trees. "I should prepare you, Peter. The estate is quite impressive." Impressive didn't begin to cover it. When we rounded the final curve and the house came into view, I actually gasped. It was a massive Victorian mansion, 3 stories tall with wraparound porches and intricate gingerbread trim painted in cream and deep green. The grounds stretched out in all directions, perfectly manicured lawns giving way to gardens and wooded areas that seemed to go on forever. "This is mine?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "This is yours," Mr. Whitmore confirmed. "All 15 acres, plus the house and everything in it." We pulled up to a circular driveway made of crushed gravel that crunched under the tires. As I got out of the car, I could hear birds singing in the trees and smell flowers blooming somewhere nearby. It was so quiet, so peaceful, that for a moment I wondered if I was dreaming. "Mr. Whitmore unlocked the front door, which was solid oak with stained glass panels that threw colored light across the hardwood floors of the foyer. "Reginald had the house completely renovated about 10 years ago," he explained as we stepped inside. "All the modern conveniences, but maintaining the original Victorian character." The house was magnificent. High ceilings with original crown molding, a grand staircase that curved up to the 2nd floor, rooms filled with antique furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. But it wasn't cold or formal. Somehow it felt like a home. "The kitchen was completely updated," Mr. Whitmore said, leading me through rooms that seemed to go on forever. "New appliances, granite countertops. But look at this." He showed me a kitchen that was larger than my entire living room back in Sarah's house. Professional-grade appliances, an island with bar stools, windows that looked out over gardens where I could see roses blooming in neat rows. "And the library," he continued, opening a set of double doors. I stopped in the doorway, overwhelmed. The room was lined floor to ceiling with books, thousands of them, with a rolling ladder and comfortable leather chairs positioned near tall windows. A fire was already laid in the fireplace, ready to be lit. "Reginald was quite a reader," Mr. Whitmore said. "I think you'll find he had excellent taste in literature." We continued the tour. A formal dining room with a table that could seat 12. A living room with a grand piano and furniture that probably cost more than I'd made in a year. A workshop in the basement equipped with every tool a man could want. Upstairs, 6 bedrooms, each with its own bathroom and sitting area. "This is the master suite," Mr. Whitmore said, opening the door to a room that was larger than most apartments. The bed was massive, with a carved wooden headboard and linens that looked like they'd come from an expensive hotel. French doors opened onto a balcony that overlooked the gardens. I walked out onto the balcony and gripped the railing, looking out over land that belonged to me. In the distance, I could see a small pond with a dock, surrounded by weeping willows. To the left, there was what looked like a vegetable garden, and beyond that, a small orchard. "It's too much," I said finally. "I don't deserve this." "Your uncle thought you did," Mr. Whitmore said gently. "He spent years researching the family he'd lost. When he found out about you, about the life you'd built, the way you'd taken care of your wife through her illness, the way you'd raised your daughter, he was proud to call you family. If only he knew what my daughter really turned out to be." "Peter, I want you to see something else." Mr. Whitmore led me back downstairs to what he called the study. It was a smaller room, more intimate than the library, with a desk and filing cabinets and walls covered with photographs. "Reginald was quite the detective when it came to family history," he said, pointing to the photographs. "Look at this." The wall was covered with pictures I'd never seen before. My father as a young man, pictures of him and Uncle Reginald together before their falling out, pictures of my grandparents, aunts, and uncles I'd never known existed, and in the center, several pictures of me. "How did he get these?" I asked, moving closer to examine them. "He hired investigators years ago. This one," he pointed to a picture of me in my army uniform, "came from military records. This one, a picture of me and Margaret on our wedding day, he found in newspaper archives from your hometown. There were pictures of Sarah, too, from when she was little. School photos, pictures of her at birthday parties, even one of her high school graduation. For a moment, looking at her young, innocent face, I felt a pang of the old love, the old protectiveness I'd felt when she was small. "He was watching over you in a way," Mr. Whitmore said. "Even though he'd never met you, he felt connected to you. He wanted to make sure his brother's son was doing well." I turned to a filing cabinet that stood open, revealing folders neatly labeled with dates and subjects. "What's all this?" "Reginald's research. He kept meticulous records of everything he learned about the family." Mr. Whitmore pulled out a folder labeled Peter Holloway, Personal History. "He knew about Margaret's illness, about how you took care of her. He knew about your work history, your military service. He was proud of the man you'd become." Inside the folder were documents I'd never seen before, copies of commendations from my job at the post office, a letter of recommendation from my supervisor when I retired, even a copy of Margaret's obituary from the newspaper. "He read this," Mr. Whitmore said, pointing to the obituary, "about how you were survived by your loving daughter Sarah. He was happy that you weren't alone, that you had family to care for you in your old age." The irony was bitter. Uncle Reginald had died believing that I was surrounded by love and care, never knowing that the daughter he'd read about was planning my destruction. "There's something else," Mr. Whitmore said, pulling out another folder. "This might be difficult to look at, but I think you should see it." The folder was labeled Sarah Holloway, Background Investigation, and it was thick with documents and photographs, pictures of Sarah and Patrick at expensive restaurants, receipts for designer clothes and luxury vacations, credit card statements showing purchases that had been made with money stolen from me. "They weren't just taking your money to pay bills," Mr. Whitmore explained. "They were living lavishly on it. Look at this." He showed me a receipt from a jewelry store. $3,000 for a diamond bracelet, purchased 2 days after they'd withdrawn $4,000 from my account for what Sarah had called emergency dental work. And this: a receipt for a weekend trip to Las Vegas, charged to a credit card they'd opened in my name. "They went to Vegas with your money while telling you they were visiting Patrick's sick grandmother." Each document was another betrayal, another lie exposed. By the time I'd gone through half the folder, I felt numb. These weren't the actions of a daughter who'd made some poor choices or gotten in over her head financially. This was calculated theft, planned and executed with complete disregard for my welfare. "How long have they been doing this?" I asked. "The financial crimes started about 2.5 years ago, shortly after Patrick moved into your house. But the manipulation goes back further." He showed me printed copies of text messages between Sarah and Patrick. "Look at these from 3 years ago." The messages were brutal in their casual cruelty. Patrick texting Sarah, "Your dad is such a pathetic old fool. How much longer do we have to pretend to care about him?" Sarah's response, "Just until Mom's been dead long enough that people won't judge me for putting him in a home. Maybe another year." Another exchange from 2 years ago. Sarah, "Dad keeps asking about the life insurance money from Mom. What should I tell him?" Patrick, "Tell him it all went to funeral expenses. He's too stupid to check." But Margaret's life insurance policy was in the folder too. $50,000 paid directly to Sarah as the beneficiary, with none of it going to funeral costs that had been paid from Margaret's own savings account. "They stole her life insurance too," I said, my voice flat. "I'm afraid so. Sarah was listed as the sole beneficiary, which was legal, but the way she used the money." "Was my wife in on this?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Did Margaret know what Sarah was planning?" Mr. Whitmore shook his head quickly. "No, absolutely not. From everything we can determine, Margaret genuinely believed she was protecting Sarah by making her the beneficiary. She had no idea what Sarah would become." I felt a small relief at that. At least Margaret had died believing in our daughter, never knowing how wrong she'd been. "What do I do now?" I asked. "How do I move forward knowing all this?" "That's entirely up to you," Mr. Whitmore said. "You have options. You could file criminal charges. You could sue them civilly to recover the stolen money. Or you could simply disappear from their lives and let them wonder what happened to you. What would you do?" He was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the peaceful gardens. "I think," he said finally, that sometimes the best revenge is living well. You have a chance now to build a new life, a good life, surrounded by beauty and peace. That might be worth more than any legal victory. I nodded, understanding what he meant, but as I looked at the evidence of my daughter's betrayal spread out across Uncle Reginald's desk, I knew that whatever I decided to do, it would be on my terms this time. For once in my life, I held all the cards. I had been living in Uncle Reginald's house for exactly 6 weeks when my phone started ringing. I'd bought a new phone, a new number, thinking I wanted a fresh start. But apparently, desperate people have ways of finding you. The first call came on a Tuesday morning while I was having coffee on the back porch, watching deer graze in the meadow beyond the garden. I'd fallen into a routine of sorts: morning coffee outside, reading in the library, working in the vegetable garden that the groundskeeper had helped me plant. For the first time in years, I felt peaceful. The phone rang, and I almost didn't answer the unknown number, but something made me pick up. "Dad?" Sarah's voice was thin, strained. "Dad, is that you?" I should have hung up immediately. Instead, I found myself gripping the phone, my chest tightening with familiar dread. "How did you get this number?" "Dad, thank God. We've been so worried." "Where are you? What happened to you?" The audacity of it took my breath away. Worried. As if she hadn't thrown me out on the street with $17 in a suitcase. As if she hadn't planned for me to die homeless and alone. "I'm fine, Sarah." "But where are you staying?" "We went to Sunset Manor looking for you, and they said you never arrived. Dad, we thought something terrible had happened." I almost laughed. Sunset Manor, the fictional nursing home they'd invented to make themselves feel better about abandoning me. "Did you really think I'd go to a place that doesn't exist?" There was a long pause. "What do you mean it doesn't exist?" "There is no Sunset Manor, Sarah. There never was. You just wanted me gone and you didn't care where I ended up." "Dad, that's not true. There was a mix-up with the paperwork, but we can fix it. Just tell me where you are and we'll come get you." "I don't think so. Dad, please." "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be." Patrick was out of line that night. He was drinking. He said things he didn't mean. We both feel terrible about how everything happened. As if it had been some natural disaster instead of a calculated plan to destroy me. "Patrick was drinking?" I said. "I don't remember seeing him with a drink." Another pause. "Well, he'd been drinking earlier, before dinner." "Look, that doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're safe and we can work this out as a family." "We're not a family, Sarah." "Don't say that. Please. You're my father. I love you. And I want to make this right." "How much of my money have you spent?" The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, trying to figure out how much I knew. "I don't know what you mean." "My savings account, Sarah. The one you've been stealing from for 2 years. How much is left?" "Dad, I haven't stolen anything. I've been helping you manage your finances. Some of those withdrawals were for your care, for household expenses. $87,000. My voice was steady, cold. "That's how much you and Patrick stole from me. $87,000 that your mother and I saved over 40 years of marriage." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, smaller. "How do you know that number?" "I know a lot of things, Sarah. I know about the fake receipts, the forged documents, the credit cards you opened in my name. I know about the jewelry and the vacations and all the other ways you spent my money while telling me you were taking care of me." "Dad, I can explain." "I've heard your explanations. I heard the recording of you and Patrick planning to have me declared dead so you could inherit everything." This time the silence was absolute. When she spoke again, she was crying. "Daddy, please. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But I never wanted to hurt you. We just got in over our heads, and it seemed like I was going to die soon anyway, so you might as well help yourselves." I never thought that." "He's a senile old man who's outlived his usefulness," I quoted from the recording. Those weren't Patrick's words alone, were they, Sarah? The crying got louder. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. But we can fix this. I'll pay back every penny, I swear. Just please come home." "I am home." "What?" "I'm home, Sarah. I have a new home now, and a new life, and you're not part of either one." "Dad, you don't understand. Without you, we can't. You need money. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You've run through everything you stole from me, and now you need more." "The house," she whispered. "We're going to lose the house. My house." The house Margaret and I had bought and loved and filled with memories. The house they'd stolen from me. "How much do you owe?" The mortgage is 3 months behind. If we don't catch up the payments, they'll foreclose. And Patrick's business failed, and we have credit card debt and... How much, Sarah? $47,000. If we can just get $47,000, we can save everything. I did the math quickly. $47,000. Less than 4 months of the allowance from Uncle Reginald's trust fund. Money that meant nothing to me now, but would save the life my daughter had built on my destruction. And you want me to give you this money?
Not give, loan. We'll pay you back with interest. I'll get a job, a real job. Patrick's already looking for work. We'll pay back everything we took, plus the loan, I promise. The same way you promised to take care of me in my old age? Dad, please, I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm begging you. We'll lose everything. The way I lost everything when you threw me out with $17? That was different. How was it different, Sarah? How was it different when you were planning for me to die on the streets? The phone went quiet except for her crying. When she spoke again, her voice was broken. Because I didn't know about the inheritance then.
There it was, the truth finally. She hadn't known about Uncle Reginald's estate when she'd thrown me out, but she knew about it now. Somehow she'd found out that I was wealthy, and now she wanted her share. How did you find out? I asked. The lawyer came to the house looking for you. When we told him you were gone, he explained about the inheritance. Dad, $12 million. You're rich now. $47,000 is nothing to you. It was everything to me when I was standing on the street with nothing. I know, and I'm sorry. But you don't need that money now. You could help us and never even miss it. Why would I help the people who tried to destroy me? Because I'm your daughter. The words came out as a wail. Because despite everything that's happened, I'm still your little girl, the one you taught to ride a bike and helped with homework and walked down the aisle at my wedding. That has to count for something. For a moment, just a moment, I felt the old pull, the old instinct to protect and provide, to fix whatever was wrong in Sarah's life. But then I remembered the recording, the cold calculation in her voice as she discussed my death. That little girl died a long time ago, I said quietly. I don't know who you are now, but you're not my daughter. My daughter would never have treated me the way you did. Dad, wait. I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I turned it off. For the rest of the day, I tried to focus on other things. I worked in the garden, pulling weeds and watering the tomatoes that were just starting to turn red. I read in the library, losing myself in a mystery novel. I cooked dinner in the beautiful kitchen, something simple but satisfying, but I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah's voice, the desperation in it. Despite everything she'd done, she was still the little girl I'd raised, and some part of me hated hearing her in pain. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls from Sarah, 12 from Patrick, and 4 from numbers I didn't recognize. The voicemails were increasingly frantic. Patrick's voice, "Listen, you old bastard, I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to help us. Sarah's having a breakdown over this. You want to punish me? Fine, but don't destroy her over something that was my fault." Sarah again, "Dad, please call me back. I haven't slept. I can't eat. I know you hate me, but please just talk to me. Let me try to explain." An unknown number. "Mr. Holloway, this is Detective Martinez with the County Sheriff's Department. Your daughter has filed a missing persons report. Could you please contact us to confirm your safety?" I called Detective Martinez first, explained that I was fine and had left of my own free will. He seemed relieved not to have to search for another missing senior citizen. Then I sat on the porch with my coffee and thought about what I wanted to do. I could help them. $47,000 really was nothing to me now. I could save Sarah's house, pay off their debts, and walk away knowing I'd been the bigger person. Or I could let them lose everything, the way they'd been willing to let me lose everything. The decision, when it came, surprised me with its clarity. I picked up the phone and called Sarah back. "Dad?" She answered on the first ring, her voice hoarse. "Dad, thank God. I was so scared you were never going to call back." "I've made a decision about the money," I said. "You'll help us?" The relief in her voice was overwhelming. "Dad, I knew you would. Deep down, I knew you still loved me." "I'm not going to give you the money, Sarah." The silence was crushing. "But," I continued, "I'm not going to let you lose the house either. I don't understand. I'm going to buy the house from the bank when it goes into foreclosure. I'm going to pay off all the debts and own it free and clear." "You mean we can stay? We can keep living there?" "No, you can't stay. The house will be mine, and I'll decide who gets to live in it." "Then why?" "Because it was my home first, Sarah. It was the home I built with your mother, and I'm not going to let strangers live in it. But you and Patrick forfeited any right to it when you stole it from me. Dad, you can't do this. Where will we live? I don't know, and I don't care. You can figure it out the same way you expected me to figure it out when you threw me into the street, but we have nowhere to go. Then you'll understand exactly how I felt that morning when Patrick dumped me on the corner with a suitcase and $17. I hung up the phone and turned it off again. This time, I left it off for 3 days. 6 months later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office in town, signing the final papers that made me the legal owner of the house where I'd lived for 32 years. The foreclosure had gone through exactly as I'd predicted. Sarah and Patrick had been evicted 2 weeks earlier, and now the house was mine again. Are you planning to move back? Mr. Whitmore asked as I signed the deed. I shook my head. No, I think I'm done with that part of my life, but I have some ideas for what to do with it. The truth was, I'd already decided. The house would become a halfway home for seniors who'd been abandoned by their families. I'd spoken with a local charity organization that specialized in elder care, and they were thrilled at the prospect of having a fully furnished, debt-free property to use for their program. It felt right. The house where I'd been betrayed would become a place where other people like me could find safety and dignity. Have you heard from your daughter recently? Mr. Whitmore asked gently. She stopped calling about a month ago. That wasn't entirely true. She'd never stopped calling, but I'd had my number changed again and made sure it was unlisted this time. The last conversation we'd had was 3 weeks after the eviction, when she'd managed to track down my number one final time. She'd been calling from a payphone, she said, because their cell service had been disconnected. She and Patrick were living in a cramped apartment across town, both working minimum wage jobs to try to make ends meet. She was cleaning office buildings at night, she told me, crying into the phone. Patrick was washing dishes at a restaurant. I know you think this is what we deserve, she'd said, but Dad, we're barely surviving. I'm 43 years old and I'm scrubbing toilets for $8 an hour. Doesn't that hurt you at all? It did hurt me, but not in the way she'd hoped. It hurt because I could hear in her voice that she still didn't understand what she'd done wrong. She thought her suffering was unjust, that I was being cruel by not rescuing her. She still saw herself as the victim in this story. Do you remember when you were 7 years old? I'd asked her. What? You were 7 and you stole a candy bar from the grocery store. Do you remember what I told you when we found out? Dad, what does that have to do with anything? I told you that every choice has consequences, and that you couldn't undo a choice by being sorry after you got caught. Do you remember that? She was quiet. I told you that if you stole something, you had to face whatever happened next, even if it was hard, even if it was scary, because that's how people learn to make better choices. I was 7 years old, she whispered, and now you're 43. Old enough to understand that stealing $87,000 from your father has consequences too. That was the last time we'd spoken. Now, walking out of the lawyer's office with the deed to my old house in my briefcase, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not happiness exactly, but contentment, peace. I drove back to Uncle Reginald's house, my house now, taking the long way through the countryside. It was early October, and the leaves were starting to turn. The air was crisp and clean, and I could smell wood smoke from someone's fireplace. When I pulled into the circular driveway, I saw a familiar car parked near the front door. Mrs. Henderson from the Historical Society was waiting for me with a folder in her hands and a smile on her face. Peter, I have wonderful news, she said as I got out of the car. The county has approved your application. The house is officially designated as a historical landmark now. I smiled, genuinely pleased. It had been my idea to have Uncle Reginald's house added to the historical register. The house was beautiful and unique, and I wanted to make sure it would be preserved for future generations. That means the tax benefits will kick in next year, Mrs. Henderson continued, and you'll be eligible for grants if you ever want to do any restoration work. Actually, I've been thinking about that, I said, unlocking the front door and inviting her inside. Would you like some coffee? I have something I'd like to discuss with you. We sat in the kitchen while I explained my idea. I wanted to turn part of the house into a museum, showcasing the Victorian era and the history of the area. The main floor would be open for tours, with the upstairs remaining my private living space. It would be a way to share Uncle Reginald's legacy, I explained. He preserved this house for almost a century. It seems wrong to keep it all to myself. Mrs. Henderson was enthusiastic about the idea. We could apply for additional grants, maybe even get some support from the State Tourism Board. This could become a real attraction for the area. After she left, I walked through the rooms of the house, imagining them filled with visitors learning about the past. In the library, I could set up displays about the books and the era they represented. The formal dining room could showcase Victorian entertaining customs. The workshop in the basement could demonstrate the crafts and trades of the period. It would give me something meaningful to do with my retirement, something that would honor Uncle Reginald's memory while helping preserve an important piece of history. I was making dinner when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I saw a taxi pulling up to the front door, and my heart sank. Sarah got out of the back seat, followed by Patrick. They looked terrible. Sarah had lost weight, and her clothes looked cheap and ill-fitting. Patrick's hair was longer than usual, and he was wearing a stained t-shirt and jeans with holes in the knees. They both looked like people who'd been living rough. I watched from the window as they stood in the driveway looking up at the house. Sarah said something to Patrick, who shrugged. Then they started walking toward the front door. I thought about not answering when they knocked. I thought about calling the police and having them removed for trespassing. Instead, I opened the door and stood there looking at them. "Hello, Dad," Sarah said quietly. She'd been crying. I could see the tracks on her cheeks. "What do you want, Sarah? Can we come in, please? We drove 3 hours to get here." "In a taxi?" Patrick spoke for the first time. "Our car got repossessed last week." I looked at them for a long moment. These two people who had tried to destroy me, now standing on my doorstep like beggars. There was no power left in either of them, no threat, no manipulation. They were broken. "You can come in," I said finally, but only for a few minutes. I led them to the living room and gestured for them to sit on the sofa. I remained standing, keeping the distance between us. "This place is incredible," Sarah said, looking around at the antique furniture and oil paintings. "It's like something from a movie." "What do you want?" I asked again. She looked down at her hands. "We came to say goodbye." "Goodbye?" Patrick cleared his throat. "We're leaving town, moving to Florida. Sarah's sister said she might be able to help us find work there. I'd forgotten that Sarah had a half-sister from her mother's first marriage. They'd never been close, but apparently desperation had forced them to reach out. We wanted to see you before we left," Sarah continued, "to tell you that we're sorry, really, truly sorry for everything we did, and to ask you one more time to forgive us," Patrick added. I studied their faces, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to. But there was nothing there except exhaustion and genuine remorse. "Why should I forgive you?" I asked. "Because we're family," Sarah said simply. "Because despite everything that's happened, you're still my father and I still love you. Because I made terrible choices, but I never stopped being your daughter." "You stopped being my daughter the moment you decided I was worthless." "I never thought you were worthless. You recorded a conversation about hoping I would die on the streets so you could inherit money that was never yours. How is that not thinking I'm worthless?" She started crying again, quietly this time. "I don't know what happened to me. I don't know how I became someone who could think those things, do those things. But I did, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life." "Yes, you do. But I also have to live with knowing that I lost my father, that I threw away the most important relationship in my life for money. And that hurts worse than anything else that's happened to us." I felt something stirring in my chest, some echo of the old love I'd had for this woman when she was small and innocent. But it was distant now, like an old photograph faded by time. "Where will you go in Florida?" I asked. "Jacksonville." "Sarah's sister lives there," Patrick said. "She thinks she can get us jobs at a hotel where she works, housekeeping and maintenance." "It's honest work," Sarah added quickly. "We're not looking for handouts anymore. We just want to earn our own way, try to build something decent from what's left of our lives." I nodded. That was something, at least. They'd finally learned that they had to work for what they wanted instead of stealing it. "I wish you well," I said finally. "I hope you find what you're looking for in Florida." Sarah looked up at me hopefully. "Does that mean you forgive us?" I thought about it for a long moment. Did I forgive them? Could I forgive them? "I don't hate you anymore," I said carefully. "The anger is gone, but forgiveness isn't something I can just decide to feel. It's something that might come with time, or it might not." "But there's a chance?" Sarah asked. "Someday there might be a chance for us to have some kind of relationship again?" "I don't know. Maybe, but not now, and not for a long time. You need to build new lives for yourselves, and I need to continue building mine." She nodded, accepting this small hope as more than she'd expected. They stood to leave, and for a moment, we all just stood there awkwardly. Then Sarah stepped forward and hugged me quickly before I could step away.
"I love you, Dad," she whispered. "I always will, no matter what." I didn't hug her back, but I didn't pull away either. "Take care of yourself, Sarah." After they left, I sat in the quiet house and thought about the strange turns life can take. 6 months ago, I'd been a broken old man with nothing. Now I was wealthy, independent, and surrounded by beauty and peace. But more than that, I was free. Free from the toxic relationships that had been poisoning my life. Free from the need to prove my worth to people who would never see it. Free to build whatever kind of life I wanted for however many years I had left. I thought about Uncle Reginald, this man I'd never met who had given me not just money and property, but the chance to discover who I really was when I wasn't trying to please people who didn't deserve my efforts. Outside, the sun was setting over the gardens, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I poured myself a glass of wine and walked out onto the back porch to watch the deer come out to graze in the meadow. Tomorrow, I would start working on the museum project. I would begin the process of sharing this beautiful place with others, creating something meaningful from the gift Uncle Reginald had left me. But tonight, I was content to sit in the peaceful silence and reflect on how far I'd come. From that terrible morning when I'd stood on a street corner with nothing, to this evening when I had everything I needed and the wisdom to appreciate it. I raised my glass toward the sunset, a toast to Uncle Reginald and to new beginnings. For the first time in years, I was truly at peace.